I remember when I was 16 years old and I, was raised kind of a simple existence, working the land, being raised by, a very proud man who was too proud, in fact, to even let me learn how to read.
God.
And I remember how all those years of being raised by that man prepared me to deftly navigate multiple layers of political intrigue and end up coming out on top after about a 8-month road trip. I remember that. That was great. Welcome back to Eragon. I'm sorry, Eldest. That's going to take some getting used to.
Same, different,
Book
different.
Blitz. Yeah, I mean, it's basically the same book, right?
Exactly. Like, what's the difference?
Chapter 2, The Council of Elders. The day after Eragon witnessed the deaths of Ajahad and kind of Murtagh, he wakes up and he's miserable, of course. He's really, he's upset about Murtagh. He's upset about Ajahad. It's a terrible thing. We know it is that he's upset because he tells us so. Saphira wakes up and she's like, "Good morning, little one." Which, by the way,
God, this book's not fun, but this the narrator's not good either. Damn is the guy who reads this book. I mean, he's good in some ways, and he's literally
I have
the worst
very
in
mixed
others.
feelings because his human characters tend to be very, very good.
Yeah.
For the most part. But anything monstrous at all, anything non-human that can speak, is done in this exact same kind of growly, odd way that's incredibly annoying. And you eventually get used to it, and it's not as big of a deal just because you're used to it, but it never becomes pleasant to listen to.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Saphira always talks "Good morning, little one." And then you've got Solemn Bum, the werecat, who's like, "I thought that you should know these things."
Solemn Bum's voice is the worst.
Solemn Bum's... Oh, but... And I said most of the human characters. I'll tell you one I can't stand the voice for in a few chapters. But more on that later. Eragon is very upset because of Murtagh and Ajahad, and he's... he tries to scry, which is a magical ability to kind of look at someone from a distance. He tries to scry Murtagh, but all he sees is just this flurry of motion, but then darkness. And so he's convinced Murtagh's dead. So we have this little exchange between him and Saphira where he basically just goes, "Man, this is horrible. This shouldn't have happened. How did the orcs even get there? How did they even ambush them?" And Saphira's like, "We may never know the truth." And when someone says that at the beginning of a fictional book, the
truth will be known.
So Eragon, he's upset, he's struggling, and then out of nowhere, he suddenly has this spasm. Just this pain erupts from the scar in his back, and he just has this seizure, and it's this horrible, horrible pain. It's completely debilitating, and he's just writhing on the ground for several minutes, and he finally has it subside. And as we mentioned last time, this is going to be kind of a recurring thing throughout the first half of this book. And I kind of have a theory on the purposes of this, but I'll get to that toward the middle of the book. So Eragon and Saphira get summoned to go and meet with the Council of Elders, who are the Council of Elders of the Varden. They are kind of the ones behind the throne, so to speak. Mm-hmm. or at least that's what they want to become. Really, they're just sort of handling the day-to-day affairs. They're kind of just a body of power below, but very significant, below the head of the Varden, but also very significant. And so, with Ajahad dead, it is up to this council to determine who is going to be the next leader of the Varden. So Eragon is summoned to go meet them. He goes and he meets with these counselors, and you have Jormungandr, who we've met a few times before. He seems like a kind of legit, honorable man, and he was Ajahad's right-hand man. And he also kind of seems to be the leader of this council, or at least if not the leader, then just kind of the one who keeps it all organized. There are 4 other members of the council. 2 of them are male, 2 of them are female. All of them are blatantly evil. You have the incredibly obese, incredibly vain female cobra lady, basically. You have the incredibly pompous and prideful kind of dude. You've got the range. You've got the more reasonable seeming but still kind of mysterious and skeevy other guy. You've got the range of, the evil chancellors. You've got them all the stereotypes in these 4 characters. So Eragon begins having a conversation with the council, and they basically tell him, hey, we want to appoint a new leader of the Varden, and we want it to be Nisawada, which is Ajahad's daughter. And not only this, but we want you, as Dragon Rider, to publicly support our choice of Nisawada, and we want you to pledge fealty to the Varden. So all these things are said in just a matter of minutes, and the whole time Eragon is having this flurry of conversation between himself and Saphira through their mental link. And this, listening to it, was so irritating to me. Again, because of what I know of Eragon as a character and his background. Braum trained him in a lot of things, apparently incredibly well. But one thing he did not teach Eragon was political intrigue. In fact, one of the reasons that we heard from Braum's mouth of why he didn't want Eragon near the Varden was because he didn't want Eragon to get caught up in the political intrigue. He didn't want Eragon to get caught up in the power struggle that is constantly going on within the Varden. So Eragon has no reason, there is no logical reason that Eragon should be able to navigate this situation with the skill and understanding that he does. Now, Eragon has been shown to be a pretty perceptive person, especially over time, which I would argue is kind of inconsistent. But anyway, he's shown to be this very perceptive person, and he's able to kind of figure things out very quickly. And to be fair, he does have a dragon on his side who isn't even a year old, but somehow has so much wisdom because of the fact that it is a dragon that she is able to get away with calling him little one and acting like the adult in the situation.
Dude, and let's consider the fact that he raised this dragon.
Yes.
She has okay. All right. Here we go. For me, when I read this story, this is what I feel. I don't feel like, okay, Eragon is a character that makes sense. Saphira is a character that makes sense. Arya is a character that makes sense. Murtagh is a character that makes sense. I mentioned this last chapter where it's like, okay, it feels like it's a D&D session, okay? And I think I may have I think saying he was playing all the characters is I think it's still sort of true. But it also feels like, okay, look, say you have a character you're playing as, right? Like, you're not gonna act necessarily like that character's gonna act. You see what I'm saying? Like, you might. If you're a really good RPer, you'll perfectly be in the role with whatever your character's history, gender, race, skill, class. You know what I mean? All of it. Um, but if you're not, like, just say you choose a preset character, right? It's not a character you've made yourself. You would play that character regardless of that character's history as you would play. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so say your character is the blue dragon and your friend is playing the guy who raised the blue dragon, but you're the sassy older sister in real life. And so whenever the blue dragon interacts with the knight, the blue dragon is sassy because you're sassy, not because the blue dragon makes sense or should be wiser or anything like that, but just because you're playing the dragon. Like, that's how I feel when I watch and listen to this. Not watching, well, yeah, listen, I do listen to this. This is what this book maybe feels like, alright? That's the kind of shit that this book, irritates the shit out of me. Like, because Eragon doesn't make sense. He's a farm boy, right? He should be talking normal. He shouldn't be talking like a fucking philosopher, knowing the ins and outs of politics. He should be like, I don't give a goddamn hell what the Barton think, Saphira. We're gonna do whatever the hell we want. You know what I mean? Like, he should be. You know what I mean? Like, but he isn't. He just perfectly always, every time, not always has a plan, but like he's intellectual when he's barely knows how to read. You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
And why? Because the person playing the Eragon character, regardless of the fact that the Eragon character is a farm boy, is intellectual. You see, and so it's a mishmash of the whole, like, it's not because Saphira makes sense that she's the wise one. You see what I'm saying? It's just that Paolini wants her to be that. And so she is. But she doesn't write that in to make it make sense. It just exists as he wants it to exist. Which is just cheap as hell. Writing-wise. Anyway.
Well, I think there's two things here. I think one, just regarding Saphira in general, it is very consistent with the female characters throughout the whole series, with exception of maybe one. No, two. With the exception of maybe two female characters in the whole series, every female character, to one degree or another, is very aloof, tends to be pretty wise, or if not wise, then at least authoritative.
Yeah.
And frequently very sassy and kind of, just, like, I don't know, I guess sassy's the best way to put it. Just very assertive in a sassy way.
Yeah.
And Saphira is no different than those things. Saphira is all of those things. Arya, in some ways, is all of those things, especially in the next book. The only two characters that I don't feel really are that way exactly are Naswada and, what's her name? Katrina, Roran's girlfriend. Outside of those two, and Katrina is for a very particular reason, but outside of those two, really, the majority of female characters are treated this particular way. And I feel like Saphira as a plot device, if you're going, this is another example of this being a plot-driven story, of Inheritance as a whole being a plot-driven story. It's not character-driven. The actions of characters at times don't make any sense. There's no logical consistency to their backstory or what they ought to be able to do or what they ought to know. It's driven by this is supposed to happen in the plot, so it does. And I think Saphira's function in that is that she is the counterbalance to Eragon to ensure that at times where Eragon's character personality doesn't make as much sense to make things happen a certain way, Saphira is there to be the voice of reason that is always right, basically.
But not even a voice of reason. Because, like, Eragon reasons, right? Eragon thinks about situations. He deeply fucking... God damn. Sorry. I have a cockroach that's been going around my room, and this thing just made a beeline for me. God. I had to like, fucking... I had to goddamn just fucking kung fu this shit down in like a matter of seconds. God. Like, I was talking about Saphira earlier, and like that entire time I was like fucking like just waiting to strike on the cockroach, and I hit it, but then I failed. Like, I hit it, but it like survived and ran away, and I've since then just been waiting, looking for it. And I didn't expect it to literally come out and just fucking charge me, but it did, dude. Holy shit. It went right for me, man.
It's just that classic David and Goliath story, you know?
God.
So you were talking about Saphira and how she's always right, but it's not because she's the voice of reason.
Yeah. And so... she's not the voice of reason. She's impulsive as fuck, right? Like, she just decides that shit's gonna happen, and it happens. Like, okay, this is how it is. Okay. Like, it's not that she makes decisions based off of, like, wisdom. I mean, she does sometimes, but it's like, it's not because she has wisdom, right? Like, she's fucking 9, if that. Not even 9. She's not even a year old at this point.
Yeah.
So, she's like 9 in the sense of 9 goddamn months. And she just has all this ancient, wizened wisdom immediately. And you could say, well, the dragons are magic, and that's why. And it's like, nah, man, like, I don't care how fucking magical you are. Unless you're, like, reincarnated and you fucking have access to your past lives, you're just not gonna have, like, knowledge as though you know through experience things without having done those things. At what point in those 9 months is she gonna have had the time to figure out political intrigue? Tell you, not a whole lot of time. But just throughout the story, though, throughout the series, she just knows what's best, just magically somehow. And it's not because she's thought it through or somehow has this deep intellectualism. You see what I'm saying? She's not an intellectual character. It doesn't mean she's not intelligent.
Yeah.
But she's not an intellectual ponderer like Eragon is, which Eragon is super intellectual and pondering. He deeply considers everything he does for the most part. Like, even in the last book, everything he ever sees, he like thinks about it's like why it's like that, and he is powerfully moved by ideas to a certain extent. And even though that makes literally no sense for the fact that he's a farm boy, that's who he is. And so he'll make a big old plan, and then Saphira will be like, no, it's not happening. Just no, that's not going to happen because of me. And then she's right. Because why? Who knows? Who fucking knows?
I'm trying to remember if there's a time in the series where Saphira's actions ultimately are incorrect, because even her actions that had negative consequences in the first book, like flying Eragon off when the Razak appeared, ultimately it had bad consequences because of Garrow, but it did end up still being a quote-unquote right decision because it kept Eragon alive.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm trying to think if there's any times when Saphira's just completely wrong. Because there's a number of times where Eragon makes a mistake. And the only time I can really think of that happens is in this book, But it's not even so much an example of what you're talking about, like an exception to what you're talking about. It's more like this is her first exposure to an adult dragon ever.
Yeah.
And in that sense, she finally gets a little bit of that dragon parenting that she's needed, but it's not a sense of like her being wrong in the sense in the same way that Eragon often is in their conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's more the fact that like there's another dragon to always be right. You know what I mean? Like there's another dragon to be the one that's correct as opposed to her, you know, actually, because you got to consider the fact that she's been parented by Eragon, so she's supposed to know knowledge through him, and like he's supposed to have taught her life lessons. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then, yet somehow she gives him life lessons, and then, she's a kid
and
dragon.
Calls him little one.
Yeah, calls him little one. She's a little dragon. Like, anyway, we can go on and on about Saphira, but I also want to critique the entire premise of the fucking first 2 chapters, okay? Like, okay, you are Eragon Shadeslayer, yes. However, you are like, how old? 17 years old? Okay, you are 17. 16. You are 16 goddamn years old. You have been in the goddamn Varden for how long now? Like 2 weeks? Is that right? 14 days? Is that correct? Do we actually know how long he's been there?
It's something like that. I think it's like roughly a
month at max.
Maybe not even that much. Like maybe just a few weeks, because I think that I mean, he also spent some time in a coma too. And then this whole chapter is taking place like 3 days after the battle. No, you're right. So I don't even know if he's actually been here a full week.
What?
I think that from the time he arrived, because let's think about this. He arrives, he spends a few days, like he gets to know Ajahad. He's taken Ajahad the day after they arrive. They talk. He explains their whole story. And then the next day, I think, is when he like has the whole thing where he like blesses the baby. And then the next day he gets tested by the twins.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then like a day or two after that is when the battle happens. And this is 3 days after that. So this has maybe been like a week that he's even been here. Jesus. As far as I can tell.
He has been here a week, which is half as long as I thought he was already here. Okay, and he's now somehow deciding that he has a right and ought to fundamentally attempt to alter the way the Varden operates. You see what I'm saying? Like, he's literally thinking to himself, okay, you know, we're going to have to choose the new leader. We're going to have to change how the Varden operates. We're going to have to fundamentally change, like, mess with the mechanisms of government of the Varden. And then a little kid shows up and he's like, oh, hey, yeah, we're taking you to the Council of Elders. And he's like, what's that? Like,
yeah, he doesn't even know.
Like,
he doesn't even know what the Council of Elders is. And then he immediately goes and dismantles their entire plan. And yet one of them at least, and don't get me wrong, they do seem like they're kind of scummy, but at the same time, one of them literally was there years before even Ajahad was part of the Varden.
Yeah. Like, Jesus Christ, dude. Okay, and like, this is like if, you know, America is at war, and there's a guy, and he shows up, and he's only been in America for like 5 days, and the president dies, and he, you know, playing some important part in some strategic battle that saves the war, you know, which, though important, yes, you know, that is important. That makes him hero status. You know, he does have influence. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to choose the next president. And then, like, and then it's like, okay, and it's like, oh, Congress has summoned you. What's Congress? You know what I mean? Like,
no, that's literally it. That is literally it. And then he goes in there And this reminds me of the chapter with Ajihad himself. Eragon has been in the Varden's custody, I guess, for a grand total of, I think, 2 days. And he goes and he meets Ajihad, the leader of the Varden, for the first time ever. And among the things that he talks about is how, because he's a dragon rider, he is naturally kind of put above any sort of authority. And so he's going to make sure that he's able to do whatever he wants to do because he's a dragon rider. And Ajihad then says, if I was any other ruler and this was any other kingdom. And it's like, uh-huh.
Like, this makes sense. This is
that's the thing. That's the biggest thing. I think that is the fundamental problem with Eragon's journey. And I think that this is actually going to become more apparent as this book in particular goes on.
It never changes.
Nothing is fully... Well, it's not just that. It's that the change that does happen, the things that Eragon does accomplish are almost never earned. They're almost never actually, really, truly earned. He somehow becomes a master of the sword in like 2 months. He somehow masters reading to the point where he can fluently go through shipping records, which, as we mentioned back in Eragon, are sure to have some sort of shorthand. I mean, there's going to be all sorts of terms he wouldn't have been familiar with. He somehow is able to master things enough with reading to be able to go through those kind of complex documents in 1 week. His journey to becoming a physically capable warrior, as well as fully realize his abilities as a writer, is not earned either, because he gets it through a Deus Ex Machina later in this book. No part of Eragon's accomplishments is truly earned. The world and fate itself bends to his benefit, and that's because this is a self-insert plot-driven story. So of course Eragon is able to go in after, I'm pretty sure, only being with the Varden maybe 10 days, and navigate a complex political situation carried out by members of a council he did not know existed until an hour before.
God.
And yet he still comes out on top. And it's because he has Saphira there, and they're just constantly thinking back and forth. Oh, what do you think they mean by that? What do you think they mean by this? And they're able to discern the intentions of these people they have never even seen before perfectly, to the point where it is blatantly obvious in a couple of chapters when you find out that the council finds out that their plans have been foiled, that they are in shock and horror that they were outsmarted by this incredibly smart. And then you have Nasawada in a chapter or two telling Eragon that she's impressed that he already knows how to play the Varden's political games.
God.
This is a girl who was raised by the leader of the Varden, and we find out not only was raised by the leader of the Varden, but was deeply, deeply trained in every intimate aspect of what that leadership would look like, and was brought into the plans and organization of the entire thing. So it's like you constantly in this series have people who have invested lifetimes into the pursuit of goals, lifetimes into learning knowledge about specific things, getting bested by Eragon just because he just does.
Because he exists. Yeah,
because he exists, and he doesn't earn any of it. Not in any real way. Even his relationship with Saphira and the fact that he's a writer in the first place happened because Arya made a slight mistake.
But he lives as though he earned every single second of it. Never once does he ever acknowledge chance. Does he ever acknowledge that all of this is pure chance? There is some sort of just fate driving him on to these things and just handing him life on a silver goddamn platter.
Not only does he not acknowledge chance, but okay, take the other thing. Okay, so you've got chance, you've got work, and then you've got like divinity.
Yeah.
And when Eragon is exposed to divinity, he outright rejects its possibility. So, in other words, in Eragon's mind, this is entirely due to him.
Yeah. Like him just somehow working hard when there actually is, whether or not the story wants to admit it, the Paolini god in the background making sure that anything that ever happens to, you know what I mean? Like
making everything work on Eragon's behalf. And that's the thing. That I think that is the number one biggest problem with Eragon's journey in the entire series. He does not earn shit. And because of that, his victories feel shallow, his defeats feel meaningless, because he barely has any real consequences to anything. And whenever he does, like this scar, it goes away in a deus ex machina only a few chapters later, or at longest, maybe half the book later, like in this case.
And then it never really happens. Like, it never happens again. After this, like, weakening, he never gets as weak as he is now. Ever again. You know what I mean?
No.
Like, ay. It's...
Even later on, even much later on, when there are like oaths that have been sworn in a language in which it is literally impossible to break said oaths, Eragon is able to find a way around that because he's just so clever. Like, every part of this series, every time Eragon faces a genuine problem, rather than having character developing moments where maybe Eragon impulsively could have made the wrong decision in this whole sequence with the Council of Elders. Maybe he could have, outright refused to swear loyalty, and then he has to deal with those consequences. But even the consequences, so-called, of Eragon's big decisions that are coming up in the next couple of chapters, we never truly experience in any meaningful way, because Eragon immediately, literally the next day, leaves town. And he's off on his adventure for this book, and I don't even know if we really spend any time with those other characters. And then the consequences that do happen to Eragon's actions are coming from the most bullshit of actions. Like, for example, the existence of an entire character later in this book, I believe, who is a result of an incredibly forgettable moment in the first book. And that was such a huge mistake on Eragon's part. And look, he's suffering consequences of his actions, and he's caused so much pain and harm. Okay. I don't buy it.
Yeah, well, because it doesn't really, like, yes, theoretically, he has caused harm and damage, but in the end, he's still, the god of the book. You know what I mean? In the end, he's still like, the Hercules to Paolini's Zeus, except minus any of the drawback that exists in the mythology, like, and all of the benefits thereof. Anyway,
Well, all of that said, long story short, Eragon and Saphira are able to discern the plot that the council has, which is basically to elect Niswada as the leader of the Varden, and then to kind of use her as a puppet. And they are really the ones who rule the Varden, and they would use Niswada entirely as a figurehead. Eragon is kind of forced into a situation where he has to swear an oath to the council members that he will swear fealty. He conveniently doesn't say who to, but he does swear fealty. And with all of this done, and Eragon feeling deeply conflicted by the fact that he feels like he's completely forced into this situation where now he's putting himself willingly under the power of this group of people who probably don't have his or the world's best interest in mind. They summon in Nasuada and ask her to accept the office of leader of the Varden, and she accepts, and that is the end of the chapter. And we'll have a lot more to say about Nasuada and this whole situation in the next chapter. So until then, everybody, thank you for listening to Book Blitz, and we'll see you in chapter 3, Truth Among Friends.
Truth among
Book
friends.
Blitz.
Like truth among friends.